Welcome to the deep dive. If you've been with us before, you'll know we've been navigating some pretty fundamental territory from the book, The Buddha's Lost Art of Gaam-Node Ru and the Three Natures.
Mhm.
We've talked about those unseen currents driving us, maybe felt the scrape of those jagged rocks. Those old patterns and blueprints from the past that seem to keep showing up.
Right, that feeling of history repeating itself.
Exactly. And perhaps felt that frustrating sense of being stuck, wanting change, but, well, not quite knowing how to break free.
Yeah.
If any of that sounds familiar, then this deep dive is absolutely for you. We're now diving into chapter 9 of the book, and it has a title that holds just a massive promise: liberation in every moment.
That title alone feels like such a breath of fresh air, doesn't it?
It really does.
Especially after exploring the weight of those past patterns, those jagged rocks we just mentioned.
Yeah,
What's truly, I think, transformative about Chapter 9 is its central idea. It completely upends the common and often kind of discouraging notion that liberation is this far-off, perfect state.
right, like something only saints achieve, or maybe after years and years of intense practice.
Exactly. Or maybe not even in this lifetime.
Uh-huh.
The book just says, no, liberation isn't that distant peak. It's something accessible now.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right now.
yeah.
In the quiet spaces, even in the noisy chaos of your everyday life.
Wow. Okay, that's a critical perspective shift right there. It feels less like trying to climb Mount Everest
Right.
and more like learning to walk one step at a time right where you are.
Precisely.
Mhm.
And this chapter isn't just offering, a nice idea.
Right.
It really grounds this possibility in the core practice the book introduced earlier.
Gaam-Node Ru.
Gaam-Node Ru, yeah.
Right.
Or setting the condition to know.
Okay.
Exactly. The book argues that this practice isn't just a tool for awareness, though. It is that it's actually the mechanism for accessing that moment-by-moment freedom.
The mechanism itself. Okay.
Right.
So our mission in this deep dive into chapter 9 is, well, to unpack this pretty profound idea of liberation. Understand exactly how the book defines it, see the vital connection it has to our daily lives, and explore in detail why setting the condition to know is presented as the indispensable key to unlocking it.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Okay, let's maybe just quickly revisit the landscape. As a reminder for everyone listening, we've discussed how our actions and decisions are often influenced, maybe even driven, by what the book calls the three natures.
The good, the bad, and the stagnant.
Right. And these aren't moral judgments, just forces or tendencies within us. And over time, living from these natures, especially the bad and stagnant ones, well, it creates these deeply grooved patterns.
Those blueprints or jagged rocks.
Yeah, the ones that feel like they dictate our path, causing us to repeat the same struggles, the same feelings.
And the book is very, very real about how this feels. It totally acknowledges that the persistence of these past patterns, the influence of these unseen forces,
Yeah.
it can make the idea of real change feel incredibly daunting.
Yeah, maybe even impossible sometimes.
Genuinely impossible. Like you're trying to sail your boat, but you constantly hear and feel the hull just scraping against those hidden rocks, down there.
Oh, yeah, that
You
feeling.
want to move freely, but there's just this dragging resistance. It's heavy.
Totally relatable. That feeling of being pulled back into old reactions, old anxieties, old ways of doing things, even when, intellectually you shouldn't. It feels heady, like it's predetermined almost.
Yes. But this is precisely where Chapter 9 introduces its radical invitation. It's a major perspective shift. It's kind of a so what,
Yeah.
directed at those jagged rocks and the entire weight of the past.
So what? Okay, tell me more about that. That sounds bold.
It is a bit bold, but this so what isn't about denial. It's not saying the past didn't happen or the patterns aren't real.
Okay.
It's a shift in how you relate to them right now.
Mhm.
The book suggests that maybe, just maybe, the reason these problems feel so intractable isn't because you are inherently flawed or broken, but because of a fundamental misunderstanding, a confusion about, as the book puts it, who was really in charge.
Who is really in charge?
Meaning, were we mistakenly identifying ourselves, the listener, you, the true vessel, with the voices or the tendencies of the three natures, especially the bad and stagnant ones?
So it's like realizing I thought the choppy waves were the ocean instead of just a condition on the ocean.
That's a great analogy, yes. Or thinking the noise was the room instead of just the sound in the room.
Okay.
The book is basically saying that when you feel driven by anxiety, that's a bad nature tendency, or stuck in inertia stagnant nature,
Yeah.
you might have been mistakenly believing that is who you are.
I see.
The so what perspective comes from realizing, even just for a moment, that you are the vessel, the awareness, the capacity for the good nature, and that the bad and stagnant are just conditions arising within you. They aren't you.
And with that realization, however brief, the book says you can start anew, right now, regardless of the past.
Right now. Regardless of how many times you've hit those jagged rocks before, regardless of how loud those old voices seem.
How? How do you do that?
Well, the book presents the possibility of simply, intentionally, plugging into the good nature in this very moment.
Okay, plugging in. What does that look like?
It's not about forcing a feeling, like pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It's more about consciously connecting to the inherent potential for clarity or peace or just ease that the book says is always present within the good nature.
Always present.
Always present. And the book notes that even a brief connection, a brief plugging into this good nature leads to an immediate, tangible feeling.
Like what?
Like a release from tension, maybe a physical lightening, or simply feeling better.
Feeling better. That sounds almost too simple to be called liberation. We tend to think of liberation as this, I don't know, monumental final state. Absolute freedom from all suffering.
Exactly. And this is where the book really challenges those common misconceptions head on. It makes the radical claim that this immediate feeling of release, this experience of feeling better when you connect to the good nature, that is the essence of liberation.
That feeling is liberation.
In essence, yes. It's not some grand destination you reach by eliminating all problems or perfecting yourself. It's an experience available in the present, in the moment you shift your condition by connecting to the good nature.
So it's not just for the spiritual athletes or people living in monasteries?
Absolutely not, according to the book. It's not just for perfect people or experts or some goal for a future life. It doesn't require you to be on a perfect retreat,
Right.
or for your boss to suddenly become nice, or for your bills to magically disappear. None of that.
Okay, that's encouraging.
It is. The book uses a wonderful analogy here. It says, just as every single step you take is walking, regardless of how far you intend to go, liberation is made up of these small moments.
Small moments.
Yeah, tiny freedoms, little pockets of time where you remember your true nature, you remember the good nature is available, and you access it.
That makes it feel much more approachable, manageable. It's not about being perfectly liberated all the time, but experiencing moments of liberation.
Exactly. Tiny, achievable moments. And the book uses another incredibly powerful metaphor to illustrate this point. The hot piece of coal.
Okay, the hot coal.
Imagine you're holding onto a burning piece of coal. It's causing you pain, obviously, but maybe you've held onto it for so long. Perhaps it's a long-held resentment or a fear or a negative self-belief that the pain starts to feel, well, normal. It might even feel like a strange kind of comfort just because it's familiar.
Yeah, I can see that. The familiarity of suffering, almost.
Right. So the book says the first step of liberation isn't necessarily having the strength or the insight to immediately drop the coal.
Yeah.
That can feel impossible sometimes.
Okay. So what is the first step?
The first step is simply the clear knowing that you are holding a hot piece of coal, just seeing it for what it is.
So the liberation isn't the dropping of the coal, but the knowing that you're holding something that's hurting you.
Yes. That act of clear knowing, of seeing the reality of the situation, I am holding this thing and it is causing pain, without immediately reacting or identifying with the pain, that itself is the beginning of freedom from its automatic grip.
It creates space.
It creates the space, exactly, for the possibility of dropping it later.
Yeah.
And this critical step of knowing, well, it brings us right back to the practice.
Which is Gaam-Node Ru, setting the condition to know.
Precisely. The book is really unequivocal here. Gaam-Node Ru is not just a tool for developing awareness. It's presented as the tool for achieving liberation.
Tool.
Yes, because by deciding what you are due, you're going to set the condition to know whether it's a specific physical sensation, an emotion you're tracking, the presence of the good nature itself, or maybe just a simple cue you've chosen. You are actively, intentionally designing your own freedom in that moment. You are creating the necessary internal condition for that, knowing you're holding the coal to arise.
And that knowing makes the release possible.
It makes the inner release, the feeling better, the moment of liberation accessible. Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like it's shifting from being a passive recipient of whatever state happens to arise in you to becoming an active participant in choosing the condition, the quality of your own mind.
Exactly that. And the book points to something interesting. the potential experience people might have had just reading certain parts, like Chapter 5, where maybe you spontaneously felt some peace or stillness arise just from reading about it.
Oh, right. It mentions that.
Yeah, and it uses this to illustrate a fundamental principle. The
Hmm.
mind naturally responds and uh, sort of becomes the quality you set it to. When you set the condition to know the presence of peace, which is part of the good nature, even subtly, your mind starts to incline towards that.
It's like setting the dial on a radio, trying to tune into a specific station.
That's a good way to put it. You're tuning the mind. But setting the dial doesn't mean you immediately get perfect, crystal clear reception.
No,
No?
definitely not. They're static sometimes.
Exactly. It's a process.
Hmm.
And the book really emphasizes that learning liberation is step by step. It's like training for a sport.
Right.
You wouldn't go to, say, one basketball practice and expect to play in the Olympics the next day.
Huh. No.
Well, similarly, you don't expect to be fully enlightened the moment you start setting the condition to know. But the practice makes these small windows of liberation accessible right now at any moment.
And that's a value.
That's the immediate value. It allows you to experience real moments of what the book calls bliss, tranquility, letting go, equilibrium, and non-suffering.
Even if full enlightenment isn't the immediate goal or outcome.
Even if full enlightenment isn't reached in this lifetime, yes. The transformation happens in these accumulating moments of freedom, these little pockets of time where you feel better, where you're not caught by the coal.
Okay. So how does this translate into actually living liberation moment by moment, in our messy, non-monastic daily lives?
Right. Well, the book's instruction is clear, though maybe a bit daunting at first glance. It suggests using Gaam-Node Ru all the time.
All the time. Wow. That sounds intense.
It does, but it quickly clarifies what this really means. It means whenever you remember to.
Ah, okay. Whenever you remember,
Yeah,
that feels much more achievable, less pressure.
much less pressure. It's not about constant, rigid, white-knuckled focus.
Yeah.
It's about weaving the practice into the fabric of your day, moment by moment, whenever it occurs to you.
Okay. And does it give any guidance on how to build that muscle, that remembering?
It does. It outlines a very practical progression. You might start practicing setting the condition to know with your eyes closed, maybe in quiet moments. Find a simple anchor.
Mm-hmm.
Then you progress to practicing with your eyes open, just sitting or walking. Then you intentionally take it into more complex situations, public spaces, maybe while waiting in line.
Okay.
Then into conversations, which can be tricky. And eventually while doing everyday tasks like washing dishes or typing.
So you're deliberately creating these little pockets of liberation throughout the day.
Exactly. Within the thin layers of time, as the book puts it, that make up your day. Every moment you remember and consciously set the condition is a step into freedom, however small.
And crucially, the book emphasizes this isn't about flawlessly choosing the good nature every single second.
Right.
It's not about perfection.
No, not at all. Perfection is not the goal. It's about consistency over perfection. It's about consistently choosing to remember and set the condition to know the good nature.
Okay.
And this choice becomes possible precisely because you start clearly seeing the bad and stagnant natures for what they are. Just old voices, habitual patterns, conditioned reactions. Not you.
Like seeing the hot coal clearly.
Exactly like seeing the hot coal clearly. You see the pain, the pattern, the bad or stagnant nature arising, and you remember, that's the coal. I don't have to identify with it. The good nature is also here, always accessible. And then you set the condition to know that.
So this practice, setting the condition to know, Gaam-Node Ru, that's the thing that allows you to make that shift, to choose the good nature, to experience liberation in the small pockets of time.
Yes, the book goes so far as to call Gaam-Node Ru the missing element.
The missing element.
Yeah. It argues that you might know other practices, maybe meditation techniques, mindfulness approaches, whatever. But adding this specific instruction, setting the condition to know, fundamentally transforms them.
How so?
It adds that crucial component of intentional, directed knowing and gives you direct access to the quality of the good nature itself, making those other practices tools for actual liberation in a way they perhaps weren't quite before.
Wow. Okay. And what's the flip side? What does the book say is at stake if you don't use setting the condition to know?
The book is quite stark here, actually. It says that without this practice, you remain open to what it calls attacks from the bad and stagnant natures. Not necessarily like external forces, but the internal experience of being overwhelmed by craving, aversion, delusion, inertia, anxiety, all the habitual patterns they generate. You leave your state of mind vulnerable.
So you're driven by unconscious forces.
Pretty much. Your decisions get left up to chance, or worse, rooted in ignorance, not knowing you're holding the coal, rather than clear knowing and conscious choice.
Essentially, without setting the condition, you're letting those jagged rocks, those old blueprints, dictate your reality moment by moment. You're just reacting.
Precisely. You're basically subject to being tossed about by the internal weather systems of the untrained mind. You're letting the old patterns run the show.
But the book doesn't leave you feeling like, oh no, I forgot again, I failed. It seems quite compassionate about the struggle to remember.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of its most compassionate and practical points. It explicitly says forgetting to practice is totally normal, expected even.
Okay, that's good to hear.
We have lifetimes of conditioning pulling us into those old patterns. The key isn't to be perfect and never forget. The key is simply to start again.
Start again. No judgment, no beating yourself up.
Right. No guilt trip needed. The book talks about this progression. At first, applying the practice requires conscious, manual effort. It feels deliberate. Then, over time, with consistent practice, it becomes semi-automatic. You catch yourself quicker, you remember more often.
And eventually,
Potentially automatic. But even in the early stages, the ease of returning is paramount. The moment you remember, oh, right, setting the condition to know, you can be back in the practice instantly. Setting the condition, accessing that moment of potential liberation.
So you don't lose ground permanently just because you forgot for 5 minutes or an hour or even a day.
Nope. You just begin again. The path is always right here.
And the book gives a final pointer, doesn't it, about what to trust on this path?
Yes. It basically says, let the inner release be your guide.
That feeling of peace or lightness.
Yeah, that simple experience of feeling better that comes from connecting to the good nature, from setting the condition to know it. Trust that feeling. Let it be your primary feedback.
And trust that the rest follow.
Trust that the rest, the deepening understanding, the clarity, the further freedom, will naturally follow once that foundational condition to know is set. That feeling is the evidence. It's the feedback loop, the encouragement to keep going.
Okay. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Chapter 9, wow, the central, really powerful message that emerges is that liberation isn't some mythical concept or, a distant peak you might never reach.
Definitely not.
It's not about reaching a state where problems magically cease to exist. It's actually a series of accessible moments, tiny freedoms, these little pockets of time woven right into the fabric of your daily life.
Exactly. And the pathway to finding and, more importantly, experiencing these moments is through the intentional practice of setting the condition to know. Gaam-Node Ru.
It really shifts the focus entirely, doesn't it? From striving for some kind of perfect, permanent freedom to the simple but profound power of just remembering. Remembering and returning to the present moment and intentionally setting the condition for knowing the good nature again and again and again.
The power isn't in somehow eliminating the jagged rocks entirely, but in learning to sail your boat in a way that avoids scraping against them moment by moment by setting the right condition.
And that leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty powerful thought to carry forward, I think. If, as this chapter suggests, liberation is truly available to you right now, moment by moment, accessible simply by remembering to set the condition to know, what seemingly impossible change, or what sense of being stuck in your life might suddenly not be so impossible after all? What new possibility opens up for you, starting in this very moment, simply by choosing to remember and return to the practice?